My life will of course change. It will no longer be possible for me to give so much of my time and energies.
So, 5 minutes ago, King Charles opened a sealed palace file, expecting a briefing. What he found inside left him staring at the same page in disbelief. Camilla had not merely asked to support Catherine's forbidden royal patronage. Her office had already prepared to claim it. The announcement was written. The venue was chosen. Photographers had been contacted, and Catherine's name had quietly disappeared. Charles read the headline again. It presented Camilla as the new principal patron of the Queen Elizabeth Family Futures Patronage, a role reserved for Catherine and tied to the late Queen's vision for the future monarchy. Beneath it sat a launch date, a prepared speech, and a statement supposedly from Charles praising Camilla for accepting the responsibility. There was only one problem. Charles had never approved a single word. The room fell silent. One private secretary lowered his eyes. Another stopped turning pages. Camilla's office had described Catherine's reduced public schedule as a leadership gap, a phrase polished enough to sound reasonable, but sharp enough to wound. Catherine had not resigned. She had not surrendered the role. She was recovering while continuing to guide its work behind the scenes. Yet Camilla's team had already contacted the organization, requested donor information, discussed future events, and asked where she should stand beneath the royal emblem during her first appearance. Everything had been arranged to make the transfer look settled before Charles could object. Refusing now would create confusion. Approving it would reward pressure. That was the trap. Charles turned the page and found something worse. A South London family centre had been reserved for Camilla's first appearance 4 days later. Donors had been invited. A photographer had been booked. Staff had received instructions for the arrival. The event form did not describe Camilla as temporary support. It named her principal royal patron. Anyone who truly supports Catherine should not stay silent while her years of duty are treated as disposable. Subscribe now, like this video, and share it with someone who believes Catherine deserves loyalty, because every person who watches without showing support makes it easier for Camilla's side to believe the public does not care. At Kensington Palace, William received an urgent message from the King's private office. He was told the matter involved Catherine, Queen Elizabeth's private instructions, and an announcement moving forward without royal consent. William requested every page, then carried the file to Catherine. One look at his face told her this was not another careless rumor. William placed the announcement before her and repeated the phrase Camilla's office had used: leadership gap. Catherine remained still, but her hand tightened against the cabinet, holding the patronage's silver emblem. She asked whether Charles had approved the transfer. William answered with one word: no. That answer brought no relief. It made everything more disturbing. Camilla had acted before receiving permission, creating plans, expectations, and public pressure that could force the palace to accept what had already been arranged. Catherine then asked whether Camilla knew the role was protected. William opened the final attachment. The proposal quoted language from a restricted continuity clause written during Queen Elizabeth's reign. Hi viewers, do you stand with Catherine, yes or no? Write your answer in the comments, because silence now would only make Camilla believe she can take what Catherine spent years building. Only a small circle of advisors had access to that clause. Somehow, Camilla's office knew exactly which rule might permit temporary support during a royal absence. But one sentence had been removed. The complete wording stated that any assistance must remain under Catherine's authority and could begin only with her approval. Someone had not simply shared confidential information, someone had reshaped it into a weapon. Back at Clarence House, Charles demanded a full account of every contact made by Camilla's staff. The answers came slowly. Her aides had requested donor lists, discussed changing the annual program, and asked whether the royal emblem could appear on international fundraising material. One official admitted that Camilla's team spoke as though Charles's approval was expected, not uncertain. Then Charles found the final page. It was a 12-month transition plan explaining how temporary control could become difficult to reverse. New advisors would be appointed. Donor relationships would be tied directly to Camilla's office. Public events would establish her as the face of the organization. By the time Catherine returned fully, removing Camilla would risk embarrassing the palace and disrupting the charity. Temporary support had been designed to become permanent possession. Charles removed his glasses. Before he could summon Camilla, William called with a name he never expected to hear. The person who opened the door for her had once served Queen Elizabeth and knew the clause. The name William gave his father was Sir Alistair Pembroke, a retired palace advisor who had once helped Queen Elizabeth shape the private rules surrounding Catherine's patronage. He was respected, discreet, and trusted with documents most courtiers would never see. That was why the discovery unsettled Charles. Sir Alistair knew the patronage was protected. He also knew exactly which sentence could be misused if someone wanted to make Catherine appear replaceable. The role itself had never been ceremonial decoration. Queen Elizabeth had created the Queen Elizabeth Family Futures Patronage to support early childhood development, vulnerable parents, family well-being, and community programs across Britain. Catherine had spent years meeting researchers, visiting centres, and listening to families who rarely found themselves inside royal conversations. The late Queen had watched that work carefully. She did not choose Catherine because she needed another title. She chose her because she believed Catherine would carry the responsibility into the next reign. That promise mattered. Inside a private written instruction, Queen Elizabeth had described the patronage as a lifelong duty connected to Catherine's character, not the number of public appearances she completed in any single year. Reduced duties could not erase it. Recovery could not weaken it. Family responsibilities could not create a vacancy. The wording had been designed to protect continuity during the very moments when public pressure might become strongest. Catherine knew those terms. Camilla did too. Months earlier, Camilla had assured Catherine that any help offered during her quieter schedule would remain temporary. She had spoken warmly, promising that the patronage would be ready when Catherine returned to fuller duties. Catherine had believed her. Now, with William standing beside the silver emblem and the prepared announcement open before them, that reassurance felt less like kindness and more like cover. The pain was not only about losing a title, it was about what Camilla's plan suggested. Every hospital visit, every conversation with parents, every year Catherine had spent building trust could apparently be pushed aside the moment she stepped back to protect her health and family. Her absence had not been treated as human, it had been studied as an opportunity. William saw the change in her expression before she spoke. Catherine did not ask him to attack Camilla. She did not demand a public correction. She asked whether the organization's staff had believed the transfer was real. William hesitated. That pause answered her. Several staff members had already received messages from Camilla's office. They had been told to prepare briefing notes, identify major donors, and reserve dates for a new program of appearances. One senior official had questioned why Catherine's private secretary was not included. The reply was brief. The transition was being handled at a higher level, higher than Catherine. The phrase angered William because it implied Camilla's position beside the king gave her authority over the future queen. Yet the deeper motive was beginning to show. Camilla had spent years building causes around literacy, domestic support, and community welfare. But she remained aware that Catherine's work carried a different kind of public affection. The patronage was tied to Queen Elizabeth, to children, and to the future of the monarchy. Whoever led it would hold more than a charitable role. She would hold a symbol. Camilla wanted that symbol, and she wanted it before Catherine could return strongly enough to close the opening. The timing was not accidental. It placed pressure on Charles while sympathy for Catherine remained high, but her public schedule remained carefully limited. Her advisors had reportedly argued that Catherine's slower return risked allowing the patronage to fade from public attention. Camilla could prevent that, they said. She could attract donors, create international partnerships, and place the work at the center of the royal calendar. On paper, it sounded practical. Behind the polished language was a sharper calculation. Once Camilla became the public face of the organization, removing her later would appear ungrateful and disruptive. That was how temporary support could harden into permanent control. Anyone who believes Catherine's years of work should not be erased by palace pressure should like this video and share it now, because silence is exactly what allowed the plan to move this far without her knowledge. Then William's phone rang. The call came from the Patronage director, who sounded nervous and asked whether Kensington Palace had approved a private event scheduled for 4 days later. William said no. The director explained that Camilla's office had reserved a South London family centre, invited selected donors, and requested a photographer familiar with royal engagements. Catherine looked toward the silver emblem. William asked how Camilla had been described on the booking form. The director read the title slowly. Not temporary supporter, not acting steward, principal royal patron. The trail did not begin with the booking form. It began months earlier, during the patronage ceremony at St. James's Palace, when Catherine had been advised not to attend. Her chair stood in the front row, empty but untouched, with the silver emblem beside it. Staff were told not to move it. The message was simple. Catherine was absent. Her authority was not. Princess Anne delivered remarks on Catherine's behalf. She spoke about children, parents, and the duty to protect work beyond headlines. When the applause ended, Anne stepped away from the chair without sitting in it. Several guests noticed. So did Sir Alistair Pembroke. Sir Alistair had helped draft the patronage's early administrative rules. He knew which instructions were public, which were private, and which existed only to guide the monarch during crises. By then, he was retired. His access had narrowed. His caution had not. After the ceremony, a small group gathered near the picture gallery. They discussed Catherine's absence and the programme's future. One guest wondered what followed if her reduced schedule continued. Sir Alistair answered too freely. He mentioned a dormant continuity clause, allowing temporary support when the principal patron could not attend enough engagements. It should have ended there. 3 days later, Camilla's deputy private secretary called him. The first questions sounded harmless. Could another royal attend events? Could staff continue fundraising? Could the emblem remain in use? Sir Alistair explained that the work could continue, provided Catherine's authority remained untouched. A second call came the following week. This time, the questions changed. Who activated the clause? Did Catherine need to sign anything? Could a temporary steward speak directly to donors? Could the arrangement last a full year? Sir Alistair became uneasy, but he still answered. He believed he was clarifying procedure. In reality, every word was being fitted into a plan. William discovered the calls after palace security reviewed contact records from the ceremony. The dates matched Camilla's earliest drafts. The sequence was too precise to dismiss. First, the empty chair, then the private questions, then the announcement. He requested every email between Sir Alistair and Camilla's deputy. Most were cautious. One was not. It asked whether the clause could be presented as granting temporary leadership during a period of inactivity. That word appeared again. Inactivity. William read the complete clause beside the wording used in Camilla's submission. The difference was not subtle. The original stated that support could be offered only by a senior working royal acting under Catherine's direction. It could not alter the patron's title, authority, seal, or public identity. It could not continue once Catherine resumed her duties, and it could not begin without her written approval. Camilla's version included none of that. Only the opening sentence remained. Sir Alistair was summoned to Clarence House before sunset. He arrived with a dark wooden walking stick and a folder against his chest. Charles asked whether he had given Camilla permission to use the clause. Sir Alistair said no. He admitted explaining it, but insisted he had described Catherine's authority as permanent. Charles placed the altered version in front of him. The old advisor's face changed. He recognized the language. He also recognized what had been removed. A careless explanation had become a weapon. Sir Alistair then revealed something William had not found. During the second call, Camilla's deputy asked about the patronage's finances, its seal, and the procedure for appointing new advisors. Those questions had nothing to do with keeping events active. They belonged to someone preparing to control the entire structure. As he stood to leave, Sir Alistair forgot his walking stick beside the chair. Charles stared at it after the door closed, a small object left by the man whose loose words had opened a royal crisis inside the palace. Then another email surfaced. It had been sent from Camilla's office to the Patronage director 2 weeks before Charles saw the announcement. The message said, "The Queen is prepared to proceed once the palace catches up." Prepared to proceed, not waiting, not asking. Proceeding. The Patronage director also confirmed that Camilla's staff had requested access to the confidential donor database. They wanted names, giving histories, private contact details, and notes on which supporters held influence with the press. That request ended Charles's hesitation. He ordered every contact frozen, every document secured, and Camilla summoned to Clarence House without advisors. No private secretary, no legal representative, no prepared statements. Only the King, the Queen, and the announcement that had nearly removed Catherine before she knew a decision was being made. By the time Camilla arrived, Charles had placed the altered clause at the center of the table. He intended to ask one question. When did a request become an order? Camilla entered Clarence House expecting resistance, but not the silence waiting for her. Charles stood beside the window. The altered clause rested on the table beside the announcement, donor plan, and event schedule that had moved ahead without his consent. She glanced at the papers, then at him. Charles did not invite her to sit. He asked when a request had become an order. Camilla answered carefully. She said the patronage had been drifting, while Catherine remained on a reduced schedule. Staff needed direction. Donors needed confidence. Her office had prepared options, nothing more. Charles lifted the announcement. Options did not include a quotation written in his voice. Camilla looked unsettled. She called the wording provisional. Charles asked why a photographer had been booked, why donors had been invited, and why Catherine had never been consulted. Camilla replied that consultation would have delayed a decision the organization could no longer afford. That answer changed his expression. The issue was no longer timing, it was authority. Camilla argued that royal work could not remain frozen because one person was not fully available. She insisted she could keep the patronage visible. She spoke about donors and wider reach. Every sentence sounded practical. Every sentence moved Catherine further out of the picture. Then Charles asked the question she had avoided. Did she believe Catherine was still entitled to lead it? Camilla paused. Too long. She finally said entitlement was not the same as capability. The door opened. William entered carrying the original clause. Catherine followed him. She did not look angry. The room sharpened. Catherine asked why her recovery had been described as inactivity. Camilla said the phrase came from advisors and was never intended as an insult. Catherine asked why her name had been removed. Camilla answered that the public needed clarity. William placed the full clause beside Camilla's version. Clarity was exactly what he intended to provide. He read the missing restrictions aloud. Temporary support required Catherine's written approval. Her title could not be transferred. Her authority could not be reduced. Every event had to remain under her direction. Camilla said legal wording could be interpreted. William said deletion was not interpretation. Silence exposed the room. Catherine stood beside the roll Queen Elizabeth had placed in her care. William stood beside the evidence. Charles stood between his wife and a promise his mother expected him to protect. Camilla turned on William. She accused him of treating every royal responsibility as part of his inheritance. She said he and Catherine had built a wall around the future monarchy and called every challenge disloyalty. William did not raise his voice. He asked why Camilla's office had requested the donor database. She said donors needed reassurance. He asked why her team had discussed appointing new advisors. She said stronger leadership required trusted people. Then Charles opened a final folder. Inside was a 12-month strategy titled Permanent Continuity. The name changed everything. The document proposed placing Camilla at the center of every major event, attaching donor agreements directly to her office, and launching an international campaign under her image. One paragraph warned that returning control to Catherine after 12 months could cause reputational disruption and donor uncertainty. Temporary support had not been the destination. It had been the doorway. Anyone who believes Catherine should not be pushed aside should subscribe, like, and share this story now. Support means little when it stays silent, and Camilla's plan depended on the public never seeing how far it had gone. Charles asked whether Camilla had read the strategy. She said she had reviewed parts of it. He asked whether she approved the phrase permanent continuity. Camilla's composure cracked. She insisted the title was administrative, not personal. The patronage needed stability, and she had been willing to provide it when others would not. Catherine spoke quietly. Protecting someone's work did not require erasing the person who built it. Camilla replied that Catherine could not expect the palace to wait forever. Charles stepped forward. Forever had never been the question. 4 days had. 4 days until the planned appearance. 4 days until the photographs. 4 days until the public was expected to believe the king had transferred a protected role without consulting its holder. Camilla accused William and Catherine of turning Charles against her. She said they had arrived prepared to humiliate her. Charles answered that the documents had done that without their help. Still, he did not announce his decision. He gathered the files and told Camilla that Queen Elizabeth had anticipated a dispute over Catherine's absence. A sealed instruction existed, witnessed by Princess Anne and protected inside Windsor Castle. Anne was already waiting in the library. What she was about to read would decide whether Camilla had merely overreached or knowingly challenged the late Queen's final command. Windsor Castle was silent when Charles entered the private library. Princess Anne stood beside the long table with the keeper of the royal records and a senior crown advisor. No photographers waited outside. No announcement had been prepared. Only 3 sealed documents lay beneath the reading lamps, each bearing the late Queen's private mark. Charles placed Camilla's altered proposal beside them. Anne looked at the missing clauses, then at her brother. She did not ask what Camilla had intended. The papers already answered that. The keeper opened the first document. It was Queen Elizabeth's original instruction for the patronage. The language was measured, but its meaning was firm. Catherine's stewardship had been granted because of her judgment, patience, and sustained service to families. It did not depend on the number of appearances she made. Illness could not cancel it. Recovery could not weaken it. Family duty could not create a vacancy. Charles listened without moving. Every sentence removed another part of Camilla's argument. The patronage had never been designed to pass toward whoever happened to be more visible. It had been designed to remain stable when visibility became impossible. Anne then read the section governing temporary support. Assistance could be offered only with Catherine's approval. The supporter could attend events, deliver remarks, and represent the work, but could never claim the title, direct the staff, control the seal, or appoint advisors. Camilla's plan had attempted all 4. Charles asked whether any monarch could override the instruction. The crown advisor answered, a monarch possessed broad authority, but ignoring the late Queen's written intention would create a moral crisis. It would also expose Catherine to future challenges whenever her schedule changed. Anne spoke before Charles could reply. She reminded him that avoiding a quarrel was not the same as protecting the family. Each delay had allowed pressure to grow. Catherine's restraint had been treated as weakness because no one had drawn the boundary sharply enough. Charles looked toward the dark windows. He admitted what troubled him most. Rejecting Camilla would not end at the patronage. It could strain their marriage, divide the household, and encourage months of hostile briefings. She would claim William and Catherine had isolated her. Anne did not dismiss the risk. She asked one question. Was preserving peace with Camilla worth breaking their mother's promise to Catherine? The room went still. Then the keeper opened the second document. It was a record of requests submitted by Camilla's office before the matter reached Charles. One requested permission to place the patronage's royal seal on international fundraising materials. Another sought approval for new advisory appointments. A third asked staff to prepare language describing Camilla's arrival as a permanent expansion of the organization's leadership. Every request carried an earlier date. Camilla's team had prepared for victory before the king knew there was a contest. That discovery ended the last doubt. Charles rose and ordered the proposed announcement cancelled. All communication between Camilla's office and the patronage would stop immediately. The donor materials would be withdrawn. The photographer would be released. Catherine would remain principal patron without interruption. He also suspended Sir Alistair's access to restricted records pending review. The dormant continuity clause would be rewritten so no private office could use it again without Catherine's signed consent. The decision was final. Camilla received the order at Clarence House less than an hour later. Her private secretary read the first paragraph, then stopped. The announcement was cancelled. The scheduled appearance was removed. Every draft using the patronage emblem had to be returned. Camilla demanded to speak with Charles. When he entered, she accused William and Catherine of turning him against her. She said the Windsor meeting had been arranged to humiliate her and protect Catherine from scrutiny. Charles placed the seal request on the table. He told her William had not written it, Catherine had not dated it, Anne had not submitted it. Her own office had done that before asking permission. Camilla's anger sharpened. She argued that decisive action was necessary because the palace moved too slowly. Charles answered that royal responsibility could not be claimed by creating a public crisis and daring the monarch to accept it. Then he signed the refusal. 6 paragraphs closed the transfer, restored every line of authority to Catherine, and warned that no future announcement could be prepared before approval. But the palace was already too late. A suspended communications aide had copied Camilla's cancelled announcement and sent it outside the household. Before midnight, a television newsroom possessed the headline, the launch date, and the sentence suggesting Catherine was no longer capable of leading. The private struggle was about to become public, and Britain had not yet seen the document that would embarrass Camilla most. By sunrise, the cancelled announcement was no longer a palace secret. Television producers had the headline. Newspaper editors had the launch date. Online commentators had the sentence that described Catherine's reduced schedule as a failure of leadership. What had begun inside sealed folders was now moving across Britain. They referred to an unauthorized attempt to redirect a protected patronage. Then the copied documents began circulating. One page showed Camilla's planned speech. Another listed photographers, donors, and a prepared route through the South London Family Centre. The most damaging detail was buried near the bottom. Catherine had been removed from the event programme entirely. There was no mention of temporary assistance, no reference to recovery, no assurance that the role would return to her. The draft presented Camilla as though the transition had already happened and the public merely needed to accept it. That changed the reaction. Support for Catherine rose, but she refused to turn the moment into a personal campaign. Her staff suggested a statement defending her record. She declined. Another advisor proposed releasing Queen Elizabeth's instruction. Catherine refused that too. The patronage, she said, existed for families who needed stability, not for relatives competing over headlines. Her silence was not surrender. It was discipline. Later that morning, Catherine arrived at the family centre Camilla's office had intended to use for its launch. The engagement had originally been arranged weeks earlier under Catherine's schedule, then quietly absorbed into Camilla's plan. Staff restored Catherine's name before the doors opened. Outside, the crowd was larger than expected. Parents held handwritten messages. Children waved flags. Several people called Catherine's name as she stepped from the car. She paused, placed one hand over her heart, and thanked them without mentioning Camilla once. That restraint carried more force than any accusation. Inside the centre, Catherine listened to parents discussing early childhood support and financial pressure. She asked questions. She took notes. She stayed longer than planned. The cameras captured no triumph, only work continuing where Queen Elizabeth had intended it to continue. At Clarence House, Camilla watched the coverage in silence. Her advisors urged her to explain that the proposal had been designed to protect the charity, but the leaked pages made that defense difficult. The title, Permanent Continuity, had reached the press, along with the line warning that returning authority to Catherine could create disruption. The plan no longer looked temporary, it looked deliberate. If Catherine's dignity in that moment is the reason so many people still trust her, then liking, sharing and subscribing is the clearest way to show that quiet service matters more than palace pressure. Those who support her cannot remain invisible, while others mistake silence for indifference. Charles travelled to Windsor that afternoon for a private meeting with Catherine. No secretaries attended. William remained outside. The king apologised before she spoke. He admitted the proposal should never have advanced far enough to force her into defending a promise already made by the late Queen. Catherine told him what had hurt most. Not the announcement, not the planned photographs. It was the suggestion that reduced public appearances had made her replaceable. Charles rejected that idea immediately. Years of service could not be erased by a difficult season. Catherine did not ask him to punish Camilla publicly. She requested something harder and more lasting. The patronage charter had to be rewritten, so illness, recovery, pregnancy, family duty, or temporary absence could never again be presented as abandonment. Charles agreed. Before sunset, he signed a permanent settlement. Catherine remained principal patron. Temporary support required her written approval. The royal seal could not be transferred. No private office could contact donors, appoint advisors, or prepare announcements without consent. Every loophole Camilla's team had tried to use was closed completely. Charles delivered the decision to Camilla himself. She accused William and Catherine of influencing him. Charles placed the dated seal request in front of her and said the evidence had made the decision, not his son. Camilla asked whether there was any room for review. There was none. The role would remain exactly where Queen Elizabeth had placed it. That evening, Charles visited Catherine after the engagement. He did not mention the headlines or the embarrassment now surrounding Camilla's office. He told her only that the promise was safe. Catherine answered that the work could continue. The attempted takeover had ended. Camilla had prepared the announcement, built the schedule, and planned the public image, but she could not claim the one thing the documents never gave her: trust. And in the next video, one recovered email may expose who inside Camilla's office first suggested deleting Catherine's name. The message contains a timestamp from the night before the plan reached Charles, and one sentence so direct that the palace may be unable to dismiss it as a misunderstanding. Subscribe now, because missing that email means missing the moment this story becomes even more personal.